Welcome back to ITSC 1316, and in this video we will be covering managing and reconfiguring MBR and GPT partitions. We will learn how to create primary, logical, and extended partitions, so let's get started. Before we power on our virtual machine, let's add a new drive that we can use for these labs. So, right-click one of your virtual machines, and go to Settings. At the bottom left, click Add. You might get a pop-up from Windows, but if you did, just click Yes. Make sure that hard disk is selected and click Next. SCSI is fine, so click Next. Create a new virtual disk and click Next. And the default of 20 gigabytes is fine, so click Next. The file name is also fine, so go ahead and click Finish. So now we have two hard drives for our virtual machine, so now we can power it on and log into the root account. First, let's take a look at our current partitioning table on our Linux system and see what hard drives and partitions we are already using. The partitions we will be making will be much smaller than you would make in a real-world environment, but the same process applies. To view your current partitions and hard drives, you use the lsblk command. So the hard drives we see are SDA, and it has used partitions 1 through 3, and SDB, which is the drive we just added, which has no partitions in it. The SRO is our DVD drive. SD and a letter such as A, B, C, D, etc. is what you will normally see with SATA hard drives, but also with VMware hard drives. A represents the first, B the second, and so on. Partitions go 1, 2, 3, etc. with each drive. If you just want to view the partitions on a disk, you can use the blk ID command. It will also give you the UUID of the partition, which we will need in a later skill. The next thing we will need to cover is how we will write our disk sizes. Instead of using KB, MB, and GB, we will use KIB, MIB, and GIB. And when you just type a single K, M, or B, that's what it will be referring to. It's the standard Linux works with. If you put 100 MB, it will work, but you would get a partition of 97.65 megabytes instead of 100. The first type of partition we're going to create is an MBR partition. To do that, we'll use the fdisk command followed by the hard disk, in which our case is SDB. You'll come into fdisk at the prompt asking for a command. To see a list of possible commands, type M, then enter. Everything we do in here isn't permanent until we use the W command at the end. First, let's use the P command to see the current partition table. This lists the same information as the blk ID command did. I also ran it earlier for the other hard disk, so you would see what it would look like with partitions in it. Now we want to create a new partition, so we hit N and enter. We see that we can create a primary or extended partition. MBR only have 4 partitions, but if you make the last one extended partition, then you can create up to 15 logical partitions inside of it. So we will create a primary partition since we have no other partitions on this disk. You will see that fdisk will let you just hit enter and use the defaults. I went ahead and typed in the selection so you could see, but I took the defaults for everything except the last sector. By default, it will take up the entire disk, but since we likely want to create more partitions, I specified the size using the +1G, and you see it created a 1GIB partition of type Linux. Let's look at all the different types you can make. To do this, use the L option. The only ones we will use in this course are 82, 83, and later 8E. To change the partition's type, use the T option and select a partition, then put in the hex code to change it. Now we will write the partitions to the disk using the W, and it will write the partition table to the disk and exit us out of fdisk. Now I will run lsblk again, and you see the new partition as SDB1 in the table. Next, we will create an extended partition and then a logical partition in it with fdisk. So once again, we will type fdisk/dev/sdb, type N for a new partition, type E for extended, pick 4 for the partition number, and use the default first sector, and I'll use plus 5G for the size. Now that we have created an extended partition, we need to create the logical partition inside the extended. We do that the same way we created the primary and extended, but this time we will hit L, leave the first sector as default, do a plus 1G for the size. You'll notice we don't get a choice for partition number, and it will be by default 5. We will leave the partition type as Linux and type W and enter so that it writes the partition table and exit fdisk. Next, we will run lsblk command to show our new partitions. Finally, we're going to create a GPT partition. We will use the same disk we use with MBR. Normally, you wouldn't do this because it will convert the partitions to GPT, and if this was the bootable part of the hard drive or file system you regularly use, it would not function. But since there is no real data, this is fine for a demonstration. To start off, we will type gdisk/dev/sdb. And as I say, we will get a warning about partitions being converted, which is fine. Most of the commands here are the same as with fdisk, though there are a few differences. The question mark is the help instead of the M. When we hit N for new partition, you don't see choices for primary, extended, or logical, but just a prompt asking for partition numbers. We will use the default of 2, accept the first sector default, and then make the size plus 1G again. Next, we see a prompt asking us for a hex code, and it shows you hitting enter makes it A300, for which is fine for what we are doing. To list these hex codes, just use the L key like before with MBR. Basically, they just added a 00 to the end of the ones we used with MBR, so 8300, 8200, and 8E00 will be the ones we use in the course. Wow, that was a lot of information to cover, but it was very important, and we will build on it in the coming skills. Thanks for watching.